Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stacy Bloom, and I'm president of JCRC, as well as a member of JCRC's Israel and Global Jewry Committee. Welcome. JCRC has been watching closely in recent weeks as violent outbreaks in Israel have dominated the news cycle. This program is the first of a two-part series featuring some of our closest Israeli and Palestinian partners. We believe that in times like these, it is important to be in conversation with and learning from experts on the ground, particularly those like Mohammad, who are working to preserve and strengthen the fragile ties between Israel's Jewish and Arab citizens. I'll turn things over now to JCRC's Executive Director, Jeremy Burton, to introduce Mohammad and facilitate today's conversation. Jeremy?
Thank you, Stacy. The past few weeks in Israel have been extremely painful for those who live there and for those of us around the world who care about this place and the communities there. During times of crisis, we at JCRC take our cues from those on the ground who are most deeply and directly affected by what is happening. There has been concern in recent weeks that shared society efforts in Israel would be damaged beyond repair by the recent violence, particularly in Israel's mixed cities. Nonetheless, there have also been numerous displays of joint solidarity by Israel's Jewish and Arab citizens, many of these led by our own Boston Partners for Peace partner organizations. I'm extremely pleased that we're here today with Mohammad Darawshe of the Givat Haviva Institute, a close partner and an organization engaging thousands of Jews and Arabs in doing the critical work building a shared society in Israel. We were moved and deeply concerned to read Mohammad's account in the Jewish Forward of what he and his family are enduring during this time of strife. We'll hear directly from Mohammad about his experience building a shared society and how recent weeks have impacted that work. As with all our programs, please use the chat feature if you have questions, and we're going to be making time for Mohammad to get to as many of them as possible. Mohammad Darawshe is a leading political analyst and an expert on Jewish-Arab relations within Israel. He's been the director of the Center for Equality and Shared Society at Givat Haviva since January 2014, as well as an earlier stint from 2000 to 2005. Givat Haviva is a nonprofit dedicated to strengthening relations and promoting civic equality between Israel's Jewish and Arab citizens. You can read his full web bio on our website, and we'll throw it in the chat as well. Mohammad, I want to thank you for joining us today and to open it up to you to give some welcoming remarks. But before we begin, I want to ask, how are you and how is your family coping during this difficult time?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Jeremy, for giving me this opportunity to be with the Boston community, with the friends, Stacy, Eli, and many others. Actually, we're getting better. We had a very tough 3 weeks. It was 3 weeks where we met danger, a danger of being in a lynch, where I personally had to hide my identity, and when a mob of Jewish extremists approached my car in a nearby town called Afula, and they were trying to find who the Arab drivers in passing cars were. I had to hide my identity and claim I'm Jewish, and thank God my Hebrew was good enough to allow me to get away from that mob. It is similar, not as harsh of a situation, but a couple of other incidents happened with my son and my daughter, who my son works in a Jewish town. And again, another mob came looking for Arab employees in his workplace. And luckily the Jewish guard there sent him away. And my daughter, who goes to study in the university in the Technion, she faced more than once actually racist comments from also even from guards from the university and other fellow students. And I must say that this is the small angle of it. Unfortunately, some people sorry, some people in my community and some people in other communities, sorry, I'm a bit under the weather, and especially in mixed Jewish Arab cities, faced much more severe danger. A couple of people even paid their life for this. One of them was a Jewish man from Lud, and an Arab young man, 18-year-old from Al-Fahm. Two people were killed as a result of this kind of violence. But this was a sort of a situation where I would say the most similar situation to it was in October 2000 during clashes, also around Al-Aqsa Mosque in October 2000, 21 years ago. I also saw danger personally, and we had more people, more casualties at the time. We had 13 Arab citizens killed and 1 Jewish citizen killed at the time. That time it was mostly with the confrontations with the police. It wasn't a community to community type of confrontation. In this cycle in the mixed cities, it was confrontations between Jewish and Arab. I'm not sure if I can say communities, but it was mostly street fight of mobs, and at some in more than one incident, it was also live weapon and guns were used to shoot at each other. So, in a way, there's sorry. In a way, it's probably time to thank God for making it out without personal danger or injury. But it is definitely a deep wound, because the events were challenging what I would call a lifetime dedication that I've put to myself, which is to improve Jewish-Arab relations in the country. And suddenly you feel your whole area of dedication starts folding and collapsing, and you feel as if it's going to go away completely. And the level of animosity, the level of violence, the level of mistrust, and also the level of incitement. The incitement came from political opportunists that were using the events not to take responsibility to calm them down, but were using the events to incite against other community. And the senior political leadership, both Jewish and Arab, was pretty much unavailable. They chose to disappear and not to take a proper stand in real time to prevent those events from escalating to higher level. And the radical extremes from both sides were celebrating those events, including even inviting support from other towns, Jewish right wing inviting settlers to come from West Bank settlements to come and join and support the residents of Lud, the Jewish residents of Lud and Akko and Jaffa. And actually what they did were they were escalating the situation. They were going from one door to another to Arab homes and trying to find and seek confrontations. So if you ask me about my feeling during this period, it was mostly fear. Fear about personal fear about facing personal injury or something like that. For more than 10 days, me and my family avoided leaving home, and definitely leaving our village was completely out of question. And it took us some time to start believing that in the streets you're not going to be targeted. Today, my wife dared for the first time to go visit her family in Jerusalem, and she hasn't done that in a month, since even the beginning of the tension during the month of Ramadan. And I told her before she left, I told her, watch it, because there is a lot of police, and you probably end up with 1 or 2 tickets. It took 7 minutes for her to get out of the village to get her first ticket. It seems that the police is also still targeting Arab citizens to try to continue the punishment process that they have been doing even since the war ended with Gaza. The police has time now to come with harsh hands against Arab citizens. They put a target to increase the number of people arrested from the Arab community from 1,550 during the events to increase it by 500 additional people in this week. They've already gathered more than 250, and the collective punishment continues. So I'm sorry to say, Jeremy, it's not over for me. It's still a rolling event. It's an event that we see the personal arena mixed with the larger arena. But it's at the same time, I find myself having to basically stop worrying about myself and not only focus on my family, but to start looking at the bigger picture. Because if we fail to do so, we actually, I personally, will deepen the failure in Jewish-Arab relations when we actually need to use this crisis to refigure out how to do it correctly.
Thank you, Mohammad. There's so much that you've already put on the table for us today, and I want to start before we go wider into the broader, the larger picture that you referenced. Thank you for sharing what's going on with your family, and I know that we have been in your home as your guest. We've sat in your living room. You've offered us tea when we've come with visitors, and we've talked about these issues in a different moment. And I'm thinking, as you're talking about that drive out of your village, and where one gets to get 7 minutes, and it's hard to pull back and talk about so many of the issues that you just touched on without first staying with acknowledging and the fear that you express and that your family expresses, and to recognize how fear has come up so much in the conversation as we've been watching it from here. And you are a dear partner and a friend. So I want to ask, before we talk about more deeply about the broader picture, so you've been doing this work for a very long time. Your children have grown up with you being committed to this work. And these events happen with your son, your daughter, your wife right now. What do you say to them? I'm wondering, what's the conversation you are having with your own son and daughter right now?
Well, it's basically twofold, Jeremy. One, I say to them, try to avoid danger, because it's out there. There are lots of people that are probably not seeing the situation as we see it. Maybe they see it out of a selfish perspective, whether it is individual or nationalistic, selfish perspective. They're not seeing the collective good. They're not looking at tomorrow. They're living the heat of the moment of anger, and they're living the heat of the moment of revenge. And they're trying to exercise their power, whether they have it or they don't have it. The ones they have it, sometimes they use the law to cover themselves with the legal system, whether it's fair or not. And the ones who do not have it, they tend to complete chaos and causing damage to other individuals. And what I keep saying to them, avoid being alone in front of a mob from the other side, and try to be among friends. one of the things that I've spoke about in the last couple of weeks is not only my pain of seeing pictures of people getting beaten by mobs, but my pride of seeing people saving people that get caught into those situations. I mean, that was the light that I saw also into those type of events. Yes, there were people that unfortunate families that got caught, and I keep saying that to my kids. Yes, there are lots of bad people out there today, but there are also good people that we need to look for them. I tell them to reach out to their Jewish friends, just to say hello. Without Jewish colleagues that they work with, fellow students that they are in touch with, I make a point of doing that myself. I think I've made more than 100 phone calls in the last week that I initiated with Jewish friends, just to tell them that, the fact that we feel there's a meltdown out there doesn't mean that we have to be part of it. Doesn't mean we have to disconnect ourselves from our real our real hope for partnership in society. And I even said it yesterday on radio, both in Arabic and in Hebrew. I said the duty to get out of the problem is for each individual to pick up the phone and say to an Arab to say to their Jewish friend, let's have coffee, and a Jew to his Arab friend, let's have coffee. Let's sit and talk. We don't have to agree. We don't even need to talk about the events. Let's talk about the super moon that we had last night. Let's talk about the soccer game that Maccabi Haifa had yesterday. Even if we need to avoid the issues today, but to maintain the link between each other, I think this is, I tell them, this is what we need to do right now. This is the time to be human. This is the time to avoid danger, but also this is the time to stand up for who you are. You don't have to hide your identity. You don't have to hide your your differences. I speak against the war. I speak for the establishment of a Palestinian state through negotiations, peaceful negotiations with Israel. So it doesn't mean that you have to hide what you stand for, but you need to be there as a human being, be available for a human connection. I also say to them that specifically when they talk about workplace, that they need to also realize that there's a tomorrow, and they need to be hopeful. It's not the end of the world. We had events. We probably had, some people had it worse than us. Some people were in bomb shelters with rockets falling on them. Some people even paid their life for it. And we were lucky to be a little bit distant from the events and to manage to avoid. So to be grateful to the fact that we haven't paid such a dear price, but that we have a responsibility and not just, we don't have the leverage to play victim. Even if you're a victim for a certain moment, get over it and realize that there's there's a role to play, and not a positive role to play, and not just a negative role to echo your pain and echo your anger. I think that echoing that anger is not the right thing. I also invite them to see the positive signs that are coming out. I mentioned one, people saving people that get caught into a situation. So yes, there are those 30, 40 people, mobs that come and attack you, but at a certain moment, that one person that comes and says, enough is enough, and they put themselves in front of that mob to try to save you, and after that person steps in, another 30 people come to help him. That's the light that we need to look at. That's a silent majority that usually chooses maybe to disappear in the heat of the moment, but they get their act together and they act and they save lives. So I tell them, look for those people. Look for, try to rub people and see if they're true gold or not by asking them the question, if you happen to be in this kind of situation, what would you do? Would you endanger yourself to save a Jewish person? In my personal answer is yes. I would endanger myself to save a Jewish person if he's stuck with a mob in my own village. But I also know that most of my friends, most of my Jewish friends will probably do the same. Not to me, but to any Arab person that might be a casualty of those kinds of situations. And luckily, what I'm saying is not just a personal feeling. There was a study that was published 2 days ago by an institute called Accord. It showed that 82% of Jews are against violence and would step in to prevent violence from happening. I'm sorry, 87% of Jews and 82% of Arab citizens. That's who we are. 82 to 87% of our communities are against violence. And the question is, do you want to be part of that 82 to 87%? Or do you want to be part of the 13 to 18% who are willing to endorse violence either by silence and unfortunately sometimes by action? Sometimes people endorse violence without having to do it. You just watch, either by understand why it's happening, or just enjoy the scene, or just say, okay, they brought it on themselves. So I for my kids, I say you need to be part of the 80+%, the rational majority, people that know what's right and wrong, people that can tell what's right and wrong.
Thank you, Mohammed. I feel like I both want to give you a break. If we were sitting in your living room, we'd try to talk for a minute or two so you could drink some water, have a tea. I'm sorry that you're under the weather, and I'm grateful that you are making the time to be with us when you are under the weather. I wish I could pass you one of the lozenges that's sitting here on my desk, maybe next time we're together. But you've given us a lot. I'm listening to you, and I'm actually just so mindful of the wisdom you're offering is not just for Israelis and Palestinians, for those who are in the, that's wisdom for all of us who are increasingly fractured and not talking to each other and not in relationship across differences in our community. And I want to name that because I feel like we should be modeling some of our work here on the vision that you just described for how to talk about conflict. I want to pull back because I'm not sure everybody here knows about the work that you're doing when things are not like they've been the last couple of weeks. And as someone who is curious, is very connected to and believes in your work, also want to know how it's been affected. So I wonder if can you talk a little bit about sort of the work you've been doing at Givat Haviva, what Givat Haviva is about, and how the work has been affected, or how you imagine the work looking a week from now or a month from now, given all of the events that have taken place.
Well, Jeremy, you know the work, and I will mention it very quickly. I mean, our center is the largest center for peace education and shared society education in Israel. We do basically two things. One is conduct programs to bring Jewish and Arab communities together, whether it is youth in educational programs or municipal leaders to partner on joint projects where we try to identify mutual interests. And for youth, where we try to do, I would say, the process, intellectually we call it the social contact theory. In reality, I say to the facilitators, our business is to do humanization of each other. So when Jewish kids are talking to Arab kids, they stop talking through their identity glasses and they start talking through their humanity glasses. Look for the common good, look for the common interest, and focus on how you can, one, agree to disagree, learn that you have different narratives. We don't have to agree on everything. We don't have to accept, you don't have to accept my truth, I don't have to accept your truth, but at least you need to know mine and I need to know yours. We need to be able to endorse each other and accept each other and legitimize each other as human beings and as fellow citizens with equal rights in the country, to promote the concept of democracy throughout the country. And in addition, we have a lot of work that promotes equality for Arab citizens. So among those programs are, I'll just mention two projects. One project that we do is cross-sector teachers program. In America in the 60s, you did the busing of the children. In Israel, it's the political reality and the physical separation between Jewish and Arab towns and villages makes this difficult. So what we are doing is cross-sector busing of teachers. When I started this project in 2005, started with 6 Arab teachers in 6 Jewish schools. Today we operate in 1,000 Jewish schools with 1,000 Arab teachers and 350 Jewish teachers in Arab schools. This covers almost 385,000 Jewish and Arab kids every year they have a teacher from the other side coming into their life every single day. And I can promise you, Jeremy, out of the 385,000 kids in this program, I can probably sign the biggest check you can think about, that none of them were parts of the mobs beating the other side. Because the process of seeing the other as a human being is deep in their hearts and minds. And they probably will be the ones going out to endanger themselves to save the other, because they'll be thinking about their teacher from the other side, or how they will look in the eyes of their teacher the next morning if they were part of the violent aspect. Now, the amazing part of this story is not the history from 2005 until a month ago. The amazing part is that none of them was absent for a single day during the events also. They chose to teach even during this heated moment. And not only that they chose to teach, but that the communities and the schools were willing to receive them. This is something that we didn't have in October 2000. We didn't have this volume of Jewish-Arab social and educational interaction. There was not such a project. Now we do have such a project. So I think that it helps the healing process, and it makes it probably go much, much faster. We're rebouncing from the events much faster than I thought. In October 2010, there was a book written by Professor Sami Samoha from Haifa University. He called the title of the book was The Lost Decade in Jewish-Arab Relations, from October 2000 clashes until October 2010, from 2000 until 2010. That 10 years was probably seen as years of not just polarization, but even boycott, even punishment. Jews and Arabs wanted to punish each other because they were so upset at each other as a result of the events of October 2000. Now, those teachers are back there. They're covering 17% of the educational system in Israel, and they're there immediately on the spot. It's not taking them 3 months or a year or 2 to go back to normal life. Now, that's one. The second thing, on the events were started on a Sunday night. On Thursday afternoon, there was already an ad published in Israeli newspapers, in 2 newspapers. I was signed on one, and there was another ad that was done by 70 leaders of 70 big corporations in Israel. About 50 of them are Jewish and 20 of them are Arab, saying, "Khalas, enough, die, stop. We have life to manage. We have workplaces that we need to go back to tomorrow." They stepped out. They came out saying, business leadership came out saying, wait a minute, the community has to come in. The political leaders were absent, but the economic leadership came in and stepped in forward. That didn't happen October 2000, which means that the last 10, 15 years of economic integration of Arab citizens in the Israeli economy is paying off, because those, the CEO of Coca-Cola was signed on it, Coca-Cola Israel, the CEO of Bank Hapoalim, the CEO of Bank Leumi, the CEO of the biggest insurance companies in Israel. Those people have dared to put their name out in favor of shared society. These were not with me 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I was a lone wolf calling for shared society. It felt like when I was fighting a war without soldiers. Now I have commanders, not just soldiers. You have big wigs in the Israeli economic arena coming out and saying, the path is clear. All those events that happened, that took place, are not going to derail us. So I feel a great deal of pride in the fact that, that work is paying off today. Another program that I'm running is a program that tries to insert more Arab students into Israeli high tech. And actually, 2 days ago, we celebrated the first group that graduated. They started the program in 9th grade 6 years ago. And now the kids are 19 and a half, and they graduated from university. They have a university degree in computer science by the age of 19. And a number of them continued for master's degrees, and a number of them started working for some of the biggest Israeli companies in high tech. So to see this, that there's no delay in people trying to get out of it. People are immediately saying, we went through traumatic events in the last month or 2-3 weeks. Very traumatic, very dangerous events. But very quickly we're shifting gears to say, and we know the path we need to go to. And the path we need to go to is good relations between Jews and Arabs, because that's what we want. And the second is to work towards equality. Now, I must say the politicians are a bit behind. The police is a bit behind.
I'm very shocked to hear the politicians are a bit behind.
But you saw, one of our major projects is called Shared Communities, and it's pairing Jewish and Arab municipal leaders together. We managed to get them together in 3 different regions with more than 60 mayors signing calls to calm, calls to re-engage. They themselves go into the intersections to take over the public sphere. Jewish and Arab mayors standing together and saying, it's us in the front here, it's us, the social local leadership, that wants to make sure that we do not let this derail and get out of hand. So it was a tough lesson to go through, a tough experience to go through, but within a week time, I think we've done more than what we did in that lost decade, which Professor Samoha spoke about.
So I see that there are questions starting to pile up in the Q&A, and I encourage people to use the Q&A to ask them. I'm going to ask you a very sort of closed question, a finite question, because it seems like there's some people who want clarification, but I think it also takes us to one of the other questions. So it's very clear in the Q&A, people are excited or inspired by your description of this effort to bring interaction in education and the teachers, and I think there's some people who want to know what specifically this program is called so that they can find out more about it. And of course, I know it's connected to Givat Haviva, so we will share that link, but if you could just say a little more specifically what the initiative in education is called. And then to pull back, and this might be the broader question, is people want to know what we can do from the United States to support this type of relationship building work. And I'll say more at the end about Boston Partners for Peace, but if you could say something more about, like, as you look at Americans who hear this message about the importance of shared society, what can Americans be doing to support that work? I think you're on mute for the moment.
I have a colleague on the call. His name is Doron. So maybe he can put on the chat, he can put also the names of the projects I'm talking about. The cross-sector teachers program, we used to call it Yeh Beseder, meaning it'll be all right. Now, with the partnership of the Ministry of Education, we ended up changing the name. It's called Shared Language. but it's about cross-sector teachers program. As I said, the program is expanded in different type of arms, more than 1,350 teachers. Amazingly, all of them are paid by the Ministry of Education. I mean, and that's the big success, that we managed to get the salaries of the teacher by the Ministry of Education. The high-tech program is bringing in more Arab kids into high-tech. It's called high-tech seeds, or Bara'im high-tech in Arabic. Bara'im means seeds. Again, maybe Doron can put the name of the project here. It's also on the Givat Haviva website. The most famous project of encounters between Jewish and Arab youth, it's called CTC, Children Teaching Children. Actually, we won the UNESCO Prize for Peace Education for this program as the best program in the world that educates Jewish and Arab youth for peaceful education. And actually, it pairs Jewish and Arab classrooms together, where the kids meet once a month for a joint study day. They study languages, Arabic and Hebrew. They study civics. They study history, and they study basically what we call basically know the land, know the country. And through that kind of knowledge, you get to know the different angles and perspectives of how do you relate to this mountain, how do you relate to, and what's the historic connotations. But it's to understand the different angles and understand the different sense of belonging to different areas. Another project we work on, it's called Through Others' Eyes. And Through Others' Eyes is a project that we demonstrate by using art or learning joint skills how to work together. It's a photography course of Jewish and Arab kids that they study they study the skill of photography, but their project is to document the life of the other through the lens. And the documentation of the life of the other gives you the permission to go and open their closet and photograph what's in it, open their refrigerator, photograph what's in it, photograph their grandfather, their grandmother, and each picture becomes a topic to talk about. And it sort of unwraps what we call circles of identity. Now, I would say to people in Boston what I'm saying to people in my community. You have the choice of either being part of the problem or the choice of being part of the solution. We are in problem right now. We're in a problem that, when you came, I probably, when I give a presentation to first-time audience, I say, well, here's the problem, and here's what we do, the projects I mentioned, and these are the results that we expect. It's very easy to get trapped in describing the problem, in describing the fact that there's discrimination against Arab citizens, in describing the fact that there is racism between Jews and Arabs in Israel, in describing the fact that there is polarization, in describing the fact, I can probably, if you give me 5 hours, I'll probably use 50 hours describing that. It's very easy to analyze the conflict, analyze the problem, whether from a personal point of view or from a historic point of view or from an intellectual point of view or social sciences or political sciences, you name it. We have a problem. We have problems, even folds of problems. So you can either be part of the description of those problems and sometimes celebrating them, because some people live out of maintaining problems. Most of them are politicians. Or you can choose to, as I said, to be part of the solution. And I do not claim to have the absolute solution. I do not claim to be the organization or the person that will solve Jewish-Arab relations. But what I know is that I do my share every single day. I do my share. I do my share of attracting 5 or 6 more Arab students into the high-tech program every year, because that will do good to them, to their community, but also to the larger good of Israeli society. I make sure that we get 5 more schools every day to bring them into that cross-sector teachers program. Why? Because I know that we'll have 1,000 more kids to add to the 385,000 kids that we had the day before. So the day after, we'll have 386,000 kids involved into this program. So I do not talk about what I call the capital P piece. I talk about the small p piece, what I call pieces of peace. We do not have to put on the shoulders of the kids that come to Givat Haviva the solution for the conflict. The solution for the conflict is in the shoulders of the current leadership. But we are investing in each one of them that, I don't know if the leader will come out of them, but at least we know that in today, 300 Jewish and Arab kids came to Givat Haviva and they became better people, better citizens. That's 300 more than what any other organization did. That's 300 more than what any government in the Middle East has done. And we're a small NGO. So what can you do? You can do that. You can make sure that you partner with us in one of those projects that dedicates itself to make sure to pair 2 classrooms together for the next year, to pair 2 schools together for the next year. And sometimes you can do it with just an ad hoc involvement or just a sense of notification to tell us that you see us. I mean, the fact that you're willing to hear us today, to hear me, is already a signal that I'm not alone. My organization is not alone. We have partners. We have people that believe in this. We are the majority and we're not silent. We should not be silent about what we do. We should be proud about what we do. Today, this morning, we started in Reshet Bet, Israel's biggest radio station. We started a campaign that throws almost 30 ads every single day, basically calling on the business community and in the employment workplace to cherish working together, to cherish and respect the diversity in the workplace. On Sunday, we're starting the Arabic campaign. It's just the production was a bit slower. And on tomorrow morning, we're starting also social media campaign with the short videos of about 1 minute, 1.5 minutes. We have already 8 videos prepared. So tomorrow morning, we're starting with the social media campaign. We're not waiting for the problems to dissolve. We're contributing to dissolving the problems. We're not waiting for Jewish-Arab relations to get better. We're contributing to making them better. So if you have a nice idea of a video that in social media that we could put together, if you have someone, for example, in your community that is good in production, and all what we need is voiceover, go ahead, do it. Come up with creative, come up with ideas. Don't only send money. If you want to send money, yes, do it now. Doron, put the donate bottom in the chat. I'm not giving you any discounts today from donations. We need money today, but also come with your creative, come with your ideas of what should and can be done. We are on the ground to do it. We're not on the ground to just watch the view of Jewish-Arab relations dissolve. We're not going to allow this to happen. This is not the time to take vacation. This is not the time to be on the seat of fans. We're not fans coming to watch a movie. This is not a movie.
And thank you, Daron, for putting that in the chat for people. It's, Mohammad, every time I get to sit with you, I feel so inspired by the work and to reaffirm that, I can't see the audience, but I know that the people who are here, who are watching this conversation, believe in this as well. And I think that needs to be said and said again and again every single day, and not just by you, but by people here in the United States who believe in you and believe in your work. We believe in this.
Thank you.
I'd like to switch gears. An hour goes by so quickly, and there are like 17 other questions, 17 other issues I'd like to get into, but one in particular, because we've talked about it before, in other times. And I think your insights here are really valuable for an American audience. And it is specifically about identity and connection amongst the communities that characterize yourselves as Arab or Palestinian, whether citizen or not a citizen of Israel. And I know you made reference as you were describing the current events and experience to certain agitators or others we're bringing in. For example, we know, and certainly as an American Jewish audience are aware of shared identity and connection between Jewish Israeli citizens who, wherever they happen to live in Israel, in the area beyond the Green Line, et cetera. I'm curious your reflections in our really final 7 minutes we have on how the events of the last several weeks have impacted for Arab and Palestinians living in this space, how that has affected a sense of connection, a sense of identity, and are there implications for that identity and for your work going forward?
That's a very good question, Jeremy. I'm not sure if I have a full answer for it, because identity is not a switch. Doesn't come on and off. It's something that mutates. It takes time to change, and I do not see it as a spectrum of 100% that gets suddenly you are 50% Israeli, 50% Palestinian. Now we are 60% Palestinian, 40% Israeli. I do not see it like this. I actually feel that our Israeli identity is increasing by the minute. It's social, it's economic, it's political, it's cultural, it's civic identity. So maybe we're not as Israeli as the 100% Jewish Israelis. So maybe we're 90, maybe we're 80% Israeli. But we're climbing up the ladder every single day. On the Palestinian side, again, we're probably not 100% Palestinians as the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza or the diaspora, because we do not see ourselves as part of a future Palestinian state. We will not move to live in a future Palestinian state. I'm home. The graveyard of my 27 generations is just 15 yards away from here, and that's where I want to be buried. For me, the sense of local belonging is probably the strongest sense of belonging. It's stronger than the national identity and even stronger than the civic identity. So again, maybe I'm not 100% Palestinian in my futuristic perspective. I probably am 100% Palestinian in my historic perspective, cultural, ethnic identity. So maybe that makes me 80%, 90% Palestinian, but at the same time, 80, 90% Israeli. It's not a zero-sum game, so that makes me, I would say, 160% human being. My Israeliness is not on the expense of my Palestinianness, and my Palestinianness is not on the expense of my Israeliness. I think that the more we put those identities in clash, the worse. It's a disservice to our own selves. I think it's our duty to respect and be proud of those two identities and find a place where we can be maybe the connecting factor. If we have something positive to contribute, we should contribute it. If we have something negative to contribute as being part of violence in the streets, we shouldn't contribute. Because one, we harm ourselves, and I think we contribute to probably distance people from thinking that peace is possible. The less Jews believe that Jewish-Arab coexistence can work in Israel, the less they'll be inclined to support peace with the Palestinians. The more they know how to live in peace with me and with my daughters and with my wife and with my son, the more personal friendships they're able to develop, probably the more willing they will be to think about peace with my Palestinian brother and across the border. So I do think that ultimately there is a joint gain that could be taken out of a positive experience in Jewish-Arab relations inside Israel, a gain that could be contributed to both to the Israeli-Palestinian arena. So I think that our identity is as a, it's not like a temperature, what do you call it? If you check temperature,
The
goes up.
thermometer?
Yeah, it's not that. That's not the way I see it. I see it as more as capacity to become more realistic. At the end of the day, identity reflects two things. It reflects your history and it reflects your current situation. History we probably cannot affect anymore, but our current life we can affect. We can make our identity. I don't think we have to only inherit our identity. We make our identity. You made American identity part of who you are. That's something you chose to do, or your parents maybe, or grandparents chose to do, but you're embracing it and you're accepting it, and it's probably changing your perspective of or your sense of what your Judaism is, because some people say that you cannot be fully Jew unless you exercise it as a nationalist Jew by living and moving to live in Israel as a Zionist. So you can choose to say, okay, I approach it differently. My national identity, me as a Palestinian or you as a Jew, is something between me and myself, me and my immediate family and community. But my civic identity is a much larger pool. For you, it's with all other Americans. For me, with the Jewish Israelis. And the question is, how do I develop that joint Israeli identity as a common denominator for me and for the Jewish Israelis? And actually, not only them, but I think it also will be something for the American Jewish community, because you have a vested interest in Israel. So the way Israel is going to evolve is also something that will engage you.
I very much appreciate what you just said. And I'm thinking the next time we are together, because we're now coming to the end of the hour, would love to talk about how I think about, I often talk about how my Jewish American identity and my American Jewish identity are two different identities that I hold at the same time. And I also want to reflect on something you just said, because I do think there's work we can do.
Just to say on that, I have a lot of tea that in my house. You're more than invited.
I'm very much looking forward to the time very, very soon that we can begin to come and visit with you and with our other partners as well. And frankly, that you can come visit here again soon. It's been a pleasure having you in Boston in the past. It has been an absolute joy to be with you in your home and at Givat Haviva. So I guess with that, I want to say thank you to you, Mohammad, for the insight, the wisdom, the inspiration that you have given us today and that you give us at all times. And I want to come back to reaffirm, as you said, you are not alone in this work. We are with you in this work, and we are going to be with you in this work as long as it takes. And I want to thank you very much, Jeremy. And that's why I'm with you despite not feeling very good, because if I would have related to you and to my Boston community as distant people, I would have excused myself. And I've said, I'm not feeling good, call me next week. Oh. So you get me at my worst also, not only at my best. Well, I certainly am hoping that you will have a quick and speedy recovery, but your worst is, if this is your worst is much better than some of our best in terms of the inspiration you give us. So thank you. Since we're at the end of our hour, I also want to thank Eli Cohn-Postel. You mentioned him early in our hour. Eli is our Director of Israel Engagement, and he runs our programs, including our study tours that are blessed to have the opportunity to sit with Mohammad. He also runs our work in Boston Partners for Peace, which we'll throw in the chat, which is a way of the Boston community, both Jewish and broader, engaging with, supporting, learning from, and demonstrating our commitment to the visibility and amplification of groups, not only Givat Haviva, but several other groups on the ground, both working between Israeli citizens who are Jewish and Arab, and between Israelis and Palestinians who are building coexistence in the area beyond the Green Line. And before people go, I just want to note again that this is part of a series. There's a second part of this series of listening to and hearing the voices of our partners and trusted friends on the ground. We'll be joined next Tuesday, June 1st, by Raz Shmulevich. Raz lives in Netiva Asara in the south of Israel, and he's going to share some of his experience right now, living literally right alongside the Gaza Strip. So stay tuned for that. We'll have more details in the follow-up email for those of you who are here today. I also want to just take a moment to encourage everyone to join us today at 4 o'clock, along with the Jewish Federations of North America and many, many other American Jewish organizations, for a day that is focused on action against anti-Semitism here in the United States. We're putting a link in the chat, but I think all of us as Americans here have been feeling the rise of violent anti-Semitism, particularly in recent weeks, and particularly related to American reactions to what's been happening that we've been discussing here today. So please join us at 4 o'clock. And thank you all again for joining us today and to all our programs. We look forward to doing this work with you going forward. Have a good day.